what we're wanting to collect feedback on is where's the balance between kind of PvE objectives and PvP objectives? What is the kind of, expectation from mass battle perspective and like small group teams achieving smaller group objectives? What is the frequency of these events that you want to see? And how much of an impact do you want these events to have on the overall war? What are some of the types of interactions between nodes that you want to see in these war types, these different types of war rewards that you think might be cool? Some of the event rewards that we talked about, incentivizing players, the incursion of territory, the stealing of relics that we talked a little bit about.
Let's go over them. The first question that Steven asked, where is the balance of PvE objectives compared to PvP ones? The balance, at least from my perspective as a person who wants to play this game, you have to have objectives that are PvX in nature, and there has to be quite a number of them. I think from a perspective of testing this and basically playing this out from one point to another and that lasting an hour and a half was fine for presentational purposes. But realistically, there needs to be a multitude of different objectives for players to complete during prime time hours, which we know are from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. That being said, there needs to be a lot of different objectives on the map. The great thing about the Ashes of Creation map in general is it's huge. Take advantage of that real estate. Have different PvE objectives, different PvP objectives, and even probably a blend of PvX objectives. You need to have at least, in my opinion, anywhere between 7 to 10 different objectives during those hours of 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. The reasoning why is because if you have very limited objectives, then that encourages zergs to occur at every single objective point. I don't really know if we want to incentivize something like that, but the more objectives there are scattered throughout the map forces people to start going into smaller, more concentrated groups. If there's a dungeon that opened up, they can go and complete that objective in there. If there's a caravan that needs to be run from the warring node to another node, go ahead and do that. If there's a world boss that needs to be killed, go ahead and do that. You need to have all of these different objectives happening, of course, alongside of killing people, but it needs to feel grand in scope. We'd say node wars, not node battle. So it needs to really encompass that war feeling of anywhere you go on the map, it's just lit up with things to do, and also things that crafters can do, of course, things that PvPers can do, things that PvEers can do. Everybody needs to do their part in trying to contribute to the war effort. The second thing Steven said is, what is the expectation from a mass battle perspective, small group teams completing smaller objectives? Again, this goes back to the first statement that I made. You need to have more objectives for that people to feel that they need to go in these Navy SEAL kind of teams to go and complete the more niche objectives. I don't really want to rehash too much, because if you just go back to the first time, or if you go back to the first thing that I said, I think I encompassed a lot of the stuff that I mentioned from the first question. The next thing Steven asks is, what is the frequency you would like to see regarding objectives? I think, again, you need to have a good variety of them to be sprinkled from that time slot, from 3 to 9. So it needs to feel grand. You need to feel like you're actually in a war, and it's an all hands on deck approach from the node citizens. There needs to be things people can stay in the node to do that are contributing toward the war effort. There needs to be different objectives they can complete, of course, outside of actual node itself into the surrounding areas, and encompass all of the different PvX objectives as possible. But it needs to feel you are trying to go from one thing to another thing to another thing. And so I feel it's really good so far as the point scoreboard of hitting 1,000 points wins the war. I'll go into how I feel the last objective should actually be, but we'll go into that in a little bit. Let's just go into it right now. The final objective needs to feel like a pinnacle boss experience. The final objective of completing the node war, the side that's about to win, needs to complete an objective that makes them feel like an utter badass. And with the God Spike, I was saying in my chat recently when I was streaming, the last objective, whoever's channeling that God Spike, once it is done, the final 250 points that gets completed to hit 1,000, that person needs to raise the God Spike off of the ground and literally Thanos snap everybody that was on the opposing side to indicate the war has been won. We have now have the God Spike in our possession, and we just kicked y'all's ass. That needs to be in the game. You need these kind of moments for those experiences to just feel so amazing, where people are talking about this experience in their server and their node for weeks to come. And that's how you do it. The other small little bit of feedback is, guys, you have a dragon. Why isn't there ability to breathe fire onto people? You have a dive bomb where you go and boom, hit the ground and it makes a bunch of damage, and that's cool and all, but where's the fire breathing dragon ability? I would love to have a dragon hovering over and you're just breathing fire over people and it just, you know, causing a dot to burn them and they have to run around and stuff like that. That's the stuff you need for this game to have that little bit of extra and just feel so damn epic. So the next thing Steven asks is, what other node war types would you like to see? They did mention building control in the sense where you can take control of a building and shut it down for a certain period of time. They did also mention that there was going to be a node war type to, you can take away experience from a node. Now, the only thing I would say on that, because Steven also said that de-leveling won't be a thing of the node. If that's the case, then if a node has 0 experience, then let's say doing the war, you lose 25% node experience. Then they need to be negative 25% node experience. That's the thing, right? So if you're not going to have them de-level, then you need negative node experience for them to work off to go back to being 0. Because again, if there was the case where they're just freshly at that level, then they're like, aha, well, it ain't gonna matter to us. It still needs to matter to those people too. As far as different node war types, I mean, I would love if there was a kind of oddball objective, something to where people have to hold on to a certain item for a certain period of time, or even if we go into like Nickelodeon's Legends of the Hidden Temple, where there's things where you have to gather on the map to put into combining these items to make into one big item, and then you have to take that item and go and place it on some kind of a pedestal. That could be a really cool node war type, and that could be a certain relic, sort of like the God Spike. So that's something I would really love for them to do. Once we get into Alpha 2, we will probably find out more as far as like what people are actually looking for when it comes to different node war types. My whole thing with the node war system is that I don't want the node war to feel it's very easy to do. It needs to feel grand in scope, and it needs to feel very limiting, similar to castle sieges or node sieges. And because you can cast them at any time, like the wiki says, it needs to have a pretty big cost associated to it. And I do love the fact that citizens, if they aren't digging the fact that their mayor put that commission for a node war to be initiated, if they don't want to initiate war, then they don't have to do that. The one thing I will say is that I want only the node citizens or even vassal node people to only be able to contribute to that particular commission. I don't think it's conducive to have some stranger from a whole other node to come in and complete that objective and contribute to actually getting the node war started. I don't know, it just doesn't seem right to me. I think that's very much a personal node decision, or the vassalship of that node's position to indicate if they want to go into war or not. But ultimately, yeah, I think we'll find out exactly what node war types we're going to get into, especially when we start Alpha 2 and what people are looking for. But an oddball, I think that's really good. Legends of the Hidden Temple, that's another interesting take you can do for a node war. And the final thing that Steven asked is, what node war rewards would be cool as a player? The one thing I remember them talking about is that you're going to be rewarded for completing the objectives as well as the overall war. I think this is a fantastic idea, because even if you lose the war, you will manage to, hopefully if you do complete some objectives, you'll manage to get player experience, some gold, maybe a random loot bag of certain sorts. But of course, the winning people will have more than that, right? I just feel like there needs to be ample rewards to feel doing the war felt rewarding. And so if you're going to limit, which I hope you do, then you need to level pretty well in this node war. Like if I'm a level 22, I think if we complete the majority of the node objectives and then actually win the war, you should be able to basically go from level 22 to like level 24. Like you should actually feel that impact, because you don't know when you're going to actually experience another node war, right? It should be that well rewarded. As far as XP goes, we can talk about how much gold or how much random loot that you should be able to get from it, from like a grab bag and stuff. But ultimately, I think we need to get into the game to really feel like the rewards out. I will say some closing thoughts though. I think this particular live stream was so damn good from an informational perspective. I love the fact that they actually lifted the verbal NDA. And I did have a conversation with our boy Phantom X from Theory Forge. He was able to come onto my stream on Friday and give us a little bit of insider talk as to how some of the classes were. So if you want to go back and watch that VOD, I would really strongly suggest you do that, because he said some really interesting stuff there. But overall, this was fantastic. I would say definitely 10 out of 10 live stream from Intrepid based off of the information, because most of the time companies don't, or I would say companies forget about their foundational systems in their game because they're so worried about giving new content and new systems for their patches or expansions. And I really love the fact that Intrepid developers are looking at this at an evolutionary process where this is Node Wars 1.0. And I think at a 1.0 foundational setting, this is fantastic because you're going to have different Node War locations, which if you compare to New World, there wasn't really different war locations there. So that's already a win. You're going to have different Node War types, which is a whole other win based off of winning conditions, based off of different bonuses and node bonuses, and, you know, being able to take over as mayor ownership potentially with another node. So one mayor can actually be the mayor of 2 nodes for at least a certain period of time, which I find that to be really cool. That's the thing. This system needs to feel as deep as we see on paper. And I think ultimately, if we can just limit the amount of node wars that happen, like I'm kind of hoping that if we were to get a castle siege like once every 3 months, then I would hopefully want like a node war to happen on my server probably like once a month, right? I think that's a very good, you know, indication of like, wow, there's a node war happening between 2 nodes. Like that's really cool. It makes you feel, you know, good across the board. I just don't want this system to fall into the pit that New World fell into, which was it gets boring because people are initiating them all the time. And then you're doing them weekly or even daily. And I don't want that to happen with node wars. I want the buildup, I want the anticipation to happen at a very good level. People's participation can happen if it's rare enough. Well, that's how I felt about the Node War stream in general. I mean, how did you guys feel? I feel like it was such a banger live stream that we've gotten. It's probably the best of the year so far. I'm really looking forward to this month's live stream on the whole tech side or performance things they've done in their back end. I don't know, like it's just gonna be ramping up. We're gonna probably get into Alpha 2 in September, like I've always predicted. I think it's a very realistic month that we're going to get in there. But overall, this was such a banger.